Hello, and welcome to the Homeschool Conversations Africa podcast. Here, we discuss homeschooling from the African perspective and the unique challenges that come with it. If you're considering homeschooling, we hope to inspire you as you take this bold step. If you're already a homeschooler, we're here to share encouragement for this wonderful journey we're on to educate our children in the best way we can. We are your hosts, Jifa Andam and
Carissa Neti Marvel.
Let's dive right into today's conversation.
Hello again, friends.
Hi, everyone.
I'm excited today to introduce our guest, a dear friend of mine, Mrs. Ali Federwitz. Ali and her family are American missionaries who've lived in Ghana for the past 14 years. She's a veteran homeschooler, and I got to meet Ali when I first joined the Accra homeschool group a few years ago. She's wise, practical, fun to be with, a great leader, and she makes homeschooling look very easy and doable. I know what an encouragement she's been to me on my homeschool journey, and we are excited to have Ali here with us to share a bit of her homeschool life with all of you, our dear listeners. So let's get right into it.
Welcome,
Ali.
We're so excited to have you on
much.
today.
Yeah, I hope I can live up to all of those adjectives Jifa used to describe me.
I'm sure
they are all very true. They are. So Ali, can you just tell our listeners a bit about yourself, your family, your background, whatever?
Sure. And as you mentioned, we are American missionaries living in Ghana for the past 14 years, which it's amazing to me to be able to say that. We have 3 children, and we have homeschooled them from the very beginning. So you could say from birth, I think it's never really intentional, but we just in the beginning, when everyone started sending their kids to school at 2 years old, it just felt so young. I thought, oh, well, we'll just keep them home. And then we just kept keeping them home. We just started and we never stopped. So that's really what brings us, I think, to this conversation today, is that once we got going, we just kept going.
Wow, wonderful.
Amazing.
So Ali, I guess you've kind of hit on it. So there wasn't any particular reason. It was sort of organic. It just happened, right?
I think so. I think I really knew in the back of my mind that we would homeschool once we moved to Ghana. We did not always live in the great metropolis of Accra. We lived in the northern part of the country. And, when we first came, we didn't even have internet at home. Now, granted, my children, we came with a baby. She was less than a year old. So we didn't need to worry about those things right away. But as the years moved on, once we even did have internet, it was so slow. We couldn't rely on that for a lot of different resources. So we, it just felt like we'll just use the tools that we have around us, and we'll just be together as a family. And it felt natural. I think I knew that sending my kids to a local school was not the best option for us at the time. So we just used what we had, some organic and natural learning, home skills and things like that for when you're really young. And we're able to build off of that. Yeah, I don't think it was not a calculated decision, but it's probably something that I knew always in the back of my mind that that's what we would be doing, simply because of where we lived when we first came here.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I guess you touched on it a little bit. You said organic learning and home skills in the beginning. I want to find out if you had a particular educational philosophy or curriculum that you were looking at in the beginning, and maybe as your kids grew up.
Yeah, I've always struggled to find the label that defines maybe my my style or my philosophy. And early on, that really stressed me out. It's like, am I a classical, do I follow these Charlotte Mason? What am I? And I just decided that for me personally, it was more stressful to find out which category I fit into than to just do what we were doing. For other people, they do find that, determining their own educational philosophy is a great place to start. So if you're that kind of a person, that's great. What are my goals? What's my style? What kind of a family structure do we have? And determining those things might be very helpful. For me to stop and step back and try to analyze that, I just thought, I don't know who we are or what we're doing, but we're doing it.
Yeah. It's the Ali blend, which is perfect. See, I told you she's a natural, so she doesn't even need these things to define her.
Yeah. And I kind of looked at what other people were doing and just started trying things. I started with something called Sunlight. And it's a literature-based curriculum. So it uses not really textbooks, though there's definitely some math textbooks as the kids get, outside of the pre-K, kinder type years. But using, real books. We sat and we read real books about real topics. It encouraged going outside. And I remember even just telling my daughter, sometimes go outside and count the lizards. Like it was fun. It was one way to get her outside exploring. And she started out by looking for the lizards and counting them. But then it was like, oh, how many kinds are there? And look at these trees. And so just kind of fostering that curiosity and even independence in learning at a young age, I think is possible to do for kids to start kind of owning their own education and learning things because they're interested in it. So that's where I started. And we have not stuck with Sunlight or the literature-based curriculum all along. We have gone to some textbooks. I have felt the freedom to kind of ebb and flow as our life circumstances change, as my kids' needs and our family needs change as well. And something that I think may come out a few different times is, sometimes we as moms or whoever the parent is that's doing the homeschooling, you never feel like you're doing enough.
Yes.
The right thing.
Tell me about it.
It's never going to go away. It's never going to go away. Sometimes you relax more about it. That's not very encouraging, is it? Sometimes you'll relax more about it, but other times you'll be so focused on it. And so I am normal in that regard. So sometimes it's like, no.
Good to hear.
We have to do a textbook and we have to do every page in the textbook. And other times it's like, well, let's just do this one section. And that's part of I think the ebb and flow of life. And something I've just kind of allowed us to go through over the years.
It's really important to have that. And I think Ali is great at that. So we're going to talk about that a little more later.
Yeah, I have a 1-year-old now, and I'm just starting to put together something that I feel like might be good for her now. And I think I don't really find too much on homeschooling in those years, like from 1 year to maybe 2. And I know usually you find for preschool and pre-K, but like she's in this age range where it's like, okay, I want to do something with her, but I also feel like, is it too much too soon? Should I just let her be like, just, so I'm really curious as to what you did since you started right from the beginning. I'm really curious as to what you did with your children when they were in that stage.
Well, when they're in that stage, I just let them be kids, exploring, when they're that young, exploration with all of their senses, they just do that naturally. You could put out a few different objects and just see what they do with it. But I certainly was not calculated in what I set out for them. I was not thinking, oh, today we need to learn something. No, and actually, for better or worse, I was very new to Ghana. I was just trying to make it through every day. I was
That's
trying
true.
to make sure we ate food every day and that we maybe, got a bath at the end of the day. So I was very much in survival mode and just I think if your question to yourself is it too much? Then the answer is automatically yes. If you're already asking yourself that.
That's a good measure.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And playing, never underestimate the value of play at every single stage of life. It might look different as they get older, but playing is learning. It's not a break from learning. It is learning.
That's very true. That's very true. I want to go back to something that Ali talked about when we asked about how did you decide on homeschool. I just wanted to encourage our listeners because I think that's how we ended up homeschooling. It was kind of like, well, we are looking for something out there, but we couldn't find it. And so eventually it was like, well, why don't we do it ourselves? And so that's just to encourage anybody who's listening, who is in that place where, well, like you said, you knew you didn't want them in the school for many reasons. It didn't fit you. I think sometimes we force ourselves to fit into a place and then we are not happy, but then we feel like that's what we are stuck with. And so part of this podcast is just to encourage people, because I think on this side of the world, it's not a common thing. And so it just feels like, oh, can I do this? But this is just to encourage anybody out there. It's doable, as you can hear from Ali. So
it's totally doable. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to have it all lined up and all together before you can start. And my advice is just start. Pick something, pick one thing and just start. Because sometimes the planning and the preparation and even the fear of starting or the fear of not doing it right really can hold you back. So, and Carissa too, at that age, I think just making sure you're reading and talking to your kids is so important, just for developing, language development and everything. So if you only start with one thing, then start with reading. Just read to them.
Thankfully, she seems to be very interested in books. I mean, she would grab a book and then bring it to you to read to her. And she actually sits down and it's like she's listening to everything you're saying. We read the books over and over again. So it's something that is so encouraging to me to see that she's developed that interest even at such a young age. So and I'm glad that we can do it at home, because I mean, sometimes in the school setting, you may not see that spark. The teachers may not see that spark because they are so busy trying to manage everything together. But I'm glad that we are home with her, because you can see it and then kind of pick up on it immediately and then supply things that can foster it even more.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very true. So Ali, can you describe a typical homeschool day in your house for us?
Yeah,
we just want to give our listeners an idea.
Yeah, and it would be really easy for me to say what I wish our day looked like, right? I mean, I don't have an Instagram account, but I know that everyone only puts their best out on Instagram. So it would be easy for me to say what would my Instagram story look like if I took pictures of my homeschool day. But I'll be real with you. I'm going to speak kind of generally speaking what our day is like. We do have a routine, but we don't necessarily have a time stamp. We have an order for doing things and kind of a hoped for, when we want to take a break and when we like to be done for the day. But we do have flexibility, and we do kind of change things throughout the day if it gets to be too much or we need to do a little bit more. I will say from the beginning, I would try to do as much as I can with all of my kids together as possible. That has changed as they get a little bit older, but if we would start and we'd have Bible time together, and for several years we were able to do science and history all together, and we would have certain books that were usually connected to our curriculum that we would read as a family. a little tip is that we listen to audiobooks during lunchtime. Now that we're older, I keep saying now that we're older, my kids are 10, 13, and 15 now. So I'm out of that kind of real elementary stage where my kids can really focus and pay attention. So now we're listening to like podcasts and news stories, but we've found ways to really just enjoy books together as a family, and we listen during our lunchtime. And I found that to be another way that we can add in kind of more enrichment to our day. So we still, jumping back then, so we still do Bible together, and we do history together. But just this past January, my youngest two kids have very different interests where it comes to science. And my son really wants to do everything dealing with technology and inventions. And my youngest daughter wants nothing to do with that. And she wants to focus on animals and nature. So I decided this was another thing where I decided we were changing in the middle of the school year. We finished what we were doing, and then after our Christmas break, they each got to choose the direction they were going next.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
It's great. Yes. And because again, I'm not anti-school, but I just see the benefits here, because if you're stuck with one curriculum for everybody, then you might not, you might not notice that, and they would not be able to pursue their own interests. But you're in a position where you can do that, and that's wonderful.
Right. And the time will come where she will learn about those things, but maybe not this year, maybe in a couple of years when she's a little bit older and can handle the intricacies of some of those topics. So normally I'd prefer us to all do science together, and I would just adjust the questions I would ask would be, maybe a little bit more detailed for my son and a little less detailed for my daughter, just to allow for those things. But now we're doing different science. Of course, their math is a different level. We pretty much get started right away at 8 o'clock in the morning. I found that I needed a start time. Otherwise, around the house, I would always be, just one more thing. I just need to get the laundry started. I just need to. So the start time is for me, not for them. In fact, sometimes they'll get up early and do some of their own work on their own. And they just know that they're not allowed to ask me questions before I've had my coffee.
Nice.
And now we do all of our things together as much as possible. And by 10 o'clock, we take a morning break. I take that time to check in on some email. I have a day job, so to speak, on top of teaching my kids. So I do need to check in on a few things during the day. So I take that time a little bit to myself, and then they are required to be outside for their break time. So they usually get sweaty and dirty and cause a lot of trouble and make noise. And that's exactly what I want them to do. Another change that we've made actually is I used to give them a solid half-hour break. And they were finding that it was just too long. They were coming inside and checking the clock and everything. So we agreed together, again, with my kids being the age they are, we have some of these conversations about what's working and what's not working. We agreed together to shorten it to about 20 minutes, still a nice break. They get a snack during that time. And then when they come in, we have a book connected to our curriculum somehow. This time it's related to our history unit that we're doing. And we come in for their break. So it's still kind of a transition from break, because we're just having story time essentially. But it's also accomplishing things towards our goals of our curriculum. And we have found that to be nice. And then after that time, they tend to be on their own for accomplishing what they need to. And I just make myself available. We do most of our schooling in our living room and dining room area, the main areas of the house. And so I'm just in there and available. I may have some work I'm doing. I may have a book that I'm reading. And sometimes when I see that they're not really needing me, then I come to my office and I just tell them, I'm going to my desk, come get me if you need me. So I try to make sure that whatever I have as far as my responsibilities, I can be interrupted and I can be available until noon. And the saying is, mom's off duty, school's over for mom at noon.
Okay.
Yeah. So they for the afternoon time after we eat lunch or whatever. It's not a hard and fast rule. There are definitely times I need to be available and involved. But for the most part, they know that if they are going to need me for something, we have to make it happen before lunch.
Okay. And is that because you then begin your work at noon? Well, your other work.
And honestly, I'm tired. I have given them, especially when they were younger, I have given them my undivided attention.
True.
Yeah. And so it's really self-care. It's really the way that I make sure that I can get up and do it again the next day.
Yeah.
That's so important.
It's not that I don't interact with them for the rest of the day. You know, I mean, we can't escape from our children.
That won't be bad. Mom's out.
But the focus has shifted from school to whatever else. So what they do in the afternoon tends to be art projects. They practice their musical instrument. They may do some of these extra things, which I think we're going to be talking about soon.
Yeah, that's right.
Kind of extra things that we do in our homeschool that they can do on their own. And still, you know, for those people that need to check the boxes, does this count as school? Well, yes, it counts. But really, I don't think a long school day is what we need. We don't need to mirror what's happening in a traditional classroom. And we should be.
But that's so difficult, isn't it, Ali?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, maybe not for you, but for me, it's so hard. I find that I have to fight this battle every day because I want them lined up and at their seats and working. Okay, what's the next subject? Drill master, let's go.
Remember that that's your need and it's not necessarily theirs. And I do that too. And I say that's another thing that comes and goes with how strict I'm going to be about it. But honestly, we have reached points in our school where none of us were wanting to do school. Like the kids and I, we woke up each morning and we dreaded it. And that's not how I want it to be either. So we've had to make changes. I've had to make changes along the way to make sure that, yeah, we have to do our work. It's not always that we enjoy it, but I didn't want to dread it every day.
Yeah.
Yes, no, then that's no fun. That's when you need to ask yourself, why am I doing this, you know? And that's one thing I admire about you, Ali. I think you're really flexible. Like you figure out something's not working, you change it, you know? Whereas I'm like, it must work, you know, let's keep trying. I need to check off that box, but well, I'm trying to be more flexible because hey, if you're homeschooling and you can't be flexible, then I don't know, you know.
Well, it's personal. It's personal. So when something's not working, it's not that you think it's you that's the problem, not that what you're doing, the topic or the methodology or the schedule isn't working. It's very personal, and we've put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make things work. And you've spent money on that book, so yeah, of course you want to finish it.
Yes, that's so true.
Can I chip in a question about balancing having a job versus also homeschooling? I guess you've talked a little bit about how you schedule things a bit, but do you ever get to a point where it seems overwhelming, or have you had to find certain tips like tricks to get everything done in a day?
I have a really unique job, and I think making sure that your work is compatible with what you want to do for homeschooling, you know, making that decision. Can I work? If I want to work while homeschooling, is it actually feasible? Is it going to be something that our family can do? I did not have a job. I guess I've always had a job, but I did not have one with requirements until very recently. So I was well into the homeschooling routine, and we had the rhythm down as a family before I had extra responsibilities. My work is extremely flexible, and it comes and goes as far as the load. And I can really invest as much time or as little time as my family needs me to do. My field is member care. So caring for people is essentially what I do.
Okay.
And when our missionaries experience crisis, I'm all hands on deck. But other times it's just that I'm checking in with people, and I might be looking for resources, or I might be educating myself in certain areas by doing reading and things. So I do have, I think, an ideal job in that sense. But there are many parents who are working full-time and also homeschooling, and they've had to choose, what's that going to look like for us as well.
Yes, I guess that's one podcast we'll definitely have to do and see how those in that situation manage it. But yes, thanks Ali for shedding some light on that.
We'll have to wrap up here, but we will continue this conversation in our next episode, so do join us then. Thank you for listening to the Homeschool Conversations Africa podcast.